Okay, so we've seen the Pentagon go after Chinese tech giants, right? Huawei, TikTok, all that jazz, citing national security risks. Makes sense in a geopolitical kind of way.
Absolutely, a well-established playbook for foreign adversaries.
But imagine this. The Pentagon just slapped a supply chain risk designation on a leading American AI company. Not some dodgy overseas firm, but a homegrown, front-of-the-pack AI developer.
And not just any company, but Anthropic, the company whose AI, Claude, was the only one cleared for deployment on classified military networks. They went from golden child to blacklisted overnight.
That's wild. They essentially just blackballed one of the most advanced AI players in the country. This isn't about state secrets being leaked to Beijing. This is something else entirely.
It is. This is about a philosophical clash over the future of AI, right here at home. And it's creating some incredibly thorny questions about who actually gets to decide how this technology is used.
So let's unpack this bombshell. February 2026, the Pentagon, specifically the Department of War Under Secretary Pete Hegseth, designates Anthropic, a US-based AI leader, a supply chain risk. Expert, you just said it was unprecedented. Why is this designation usually such a big deal, and why is it so shocking when applied to Anthropic?
The supply chain risk designation is basically an economic death sentence for any company that relies on government contracts or works with entities that do. It's a national security bazooka. Think of it like being put on a national security naughty list, where anyone connected to the U.S. military-industrial complex is forbidden from doing business with you. For a company like Huawei, it effectively kneecapped their global ambitions. To apply this to a top-tier American company, that's not just unusual, it's a declaration of war, commercially speaking.
So it's not just about losing direct contracts with the DoD, it's about being cut off from this massive ecosystem of contractors, suppliers, everyone in the defense industrial base.
Exactly. That network is sprawling. Aerospace giants, software developers, logistics firms, even raw material suppliers. If you have any ties to the defense sector, you can't touch Anthropic. It's designed to economically isolate them, to effectively make them a pariah in a huge segment of the market. Some commentators have even called it an attempted corporate murder, which gives you a sense of the stakes.
Attempted corporate murder? Wow. Okay, so what triggered this nuclear option? It can't just be a simple contract dispute, right?
No, this goes much deeper. It was a stalemate over contract negotiations to renew and expand the Pentagon's use of Claude. The DoD wanted full control, demanding contract language that would permit all lawful uses of their AI. Anthropic, on the other hand, dug in its heels, citing its public benefit corporation charter and its core commitment to AI safety.
And this is where the red lines come in, right? What exactly were these non-negotiable ethical boundaries Anthropic put in place?
There were two main ones, and they're fundamental to Anthropic's philosophy. First, they absolutely forbid the use of Claude in fully autonomous lethal weapons. They argue that current AI isn't reliable or predictable enough for high-stakes life-or-death decision-making without human oversight. They fear catastrophic errors, unintended escalation, or violations of the laws of war.
So no killer robots, essentially. Seems like a pretty reasonable stance for an AI safety company. What was the second red line?
The second was a prohibition on the mass surveillance of Americans. This reflects deep civil liberties concerns. Anthropic doesn't want its technology used for broad, untargeted surveillance programs aimed at the domestic population.
Okay, so on one side, you have a private company saying, our tech isn't ready for autonomous killing, and we won't let it be used to spy on our own citizens. On the other, the Pentagon says, we need to use all lawful means to defend the nation, and your ethical rules are unacceptable constraints.
Precisely. And this isn't just an internal policy memo. Anthropic had actually hard-coded these red lines into Claude's operational parameters. It wasn't just a gentleman's agreement. It was built into the DNA of the AI itself. The Pentagon viewed these restrictions as an unacceptable infringement on its sovereign authority and its ability to utilize cutting-edge tech.
And Anthropic, of course, viewed it as a principled stand. So the Pentagon essentially said, remove these restrictions or you're out. And Anthropic said, no, which led to the blacklisting. It feels almost like a corporate standoff.
It is a corporate standoff, but with national security implications. And the designation, while punitive, also serves as a stark warning to other tech firms. If you think about imposing similar ethical limitations on your government partnerships, this is what could happen to you. It's a strong message.
So Anthropic gets blacklisted, deemed a supply chain risk. Most companies would probably fold, try to renegotiate, figure out a compromise, but Anthropic didn't. They went nuclear themselves.
That's right. In early March 2026, they hit back with 2 separate lawsuits against the Department of Defense. This is where it really escalates from a contract dispute to a landmark constitutional challenge.
2 lawsuits? What's their argument? What exactly are they suing the Pentagon for?
The core of their legal argument is that this supply chain risk designation is unlawful retaliation. They're essentially saying, you're punishing us for our ethical policies, and those policies are a form of protected speech under the First Amendment. They're alleging that the government is trying to unconstitutionally coerce them into abandoning their safety principles by threatening their commercial viability.
Wait, so they're framing their ethical stance, their red lines, as a form of free speech? That's a pretty novel legal angle.
It is, and it's a bold one. They're trying to establish a precedent that a tech company's internal policies on safety and ethics are a form of protected speech, and that the government can't punish them for it. Beyond the First Amendment, they're also claiming the DoD violated its own statutory procedures for making these risk designations.
Meaning the Pentagon didn't follow the rules.
Exactly. Anthropic's filings assert that the government failed to follow the process outlined in Title 10 of the United States Code, Section 3252, which dictates how these designations are supposed to be made. They're trying to portray the blacklisting not as a considered national security judgment, but as an arbitrary and capricious act of punishment.
So Anthropic is saying you broke your own rules and you're violating our constitutional rights by trying to force us to abandon our principles. This is huge. What are the potential implications if Anthropic wins?
If Anthropic prevails, it would be a monumental victory for corporate responsibility and tech ethics. It could establish a powerful precedent. Tech companies do have a right to bake ethical safeguards into their products without fear of government retribution. It would affirm that their corporate policies on safety and ethics are a form of protected speech.
Absolutely. It would empower ethics and safety teams within tech companies, giving them more leverage against commercial or governmental pressures. But, and this is a big but, if the courts side with the Pentagon, it could have a chilling effect.
What kind of chilling effect?
It would signal that the government has incredibly broad latitude to use its contracting power to compel private companies to align with its policy objectives. It could essentially gut the ability of tech companies to take public, principled stances on the use of their technology. It would tell them, if you want to work with the government, you play by their rules, no matter your ethical objections.
So it could either embolden ethical tech or completely shut down any dissent from the tech industry when it comes to national security. The stakes couldn't be higher.
Okay, so while Anthropic is busy suing the Pentagon, who steps into the void left by their blacklisting? You know, the one company that's always in the headlines for making moves.
OpenAI. Who else? The void was filled with remarkable speed. On February 28, 2026, literally as the news of the Anthropic blacklisting was breaking, OpenAI announced a major contract with the Department of War to deploy its AI models on the department's classified network.
Talk about opportunistic timing.
Highly opportunistic. And the optics were not good. It immediately sparked a backlash, with critics accusing OpenAI of prioritizing profit over the ethical principles that Anthropic was literally being punished for upholding. Even Sam Altman, their CEO, publicly conceded it looked opportunistic and sloppy.
So they jumped in, got the deal, then realized they had a PR problem on their hands. What did they do to fix that?
They moved quickly to amend the agreement in early March. The revised contract incorporated more explicit ethical guardrails. Specifically, it included a clause prohibiting the use of OpenAI's technology for mass domestic surveillance or by intelligence agencies like the NSA for such purposes.
So one of Anthropic's red lines about mass surveillance ended up in OpenAI's contract after all. That's interesting. Does that mean OpenAI is now on the same ethical page as Anthropic?
Not exactly. This is where the philosophical divergence becomes really clear. Anthropic hard-coded its red lines. They were non-negotiable aspects of the technology's design and acceptable use policy. OpenAI's safeguards, while an improvement, are largely referential.
Referential, meaning what?
They align with existing Department of Defense policies and U.S. law. This approach grants the government significant interpretational power. Critics argue that this creates a more permissive ethical framework because the definition of what is lawful can be flexible and subject to change by government lawyers and policymakers. It's essentially saying, we'll follow the rules you already have, rather than we have our own non-negotiable rules we've built into the tech.
So Anthropic says this is inherently dangerous, so we're building guardrails directly into the product. And OpenAI says we'll operate within the legal framework you provide, which you can adjust as you see fit. That's a fundamental difference in how they view their responsibility.
It really is. It's cleaved Silicon Valley's AI community into two distinct camps. Anthropic represents the faction that believes companies, as the creators of this powerful technology, have a fundamental responsibility to impose hard limits on its use. They are the ethical stewards.
And OpenAI?
OpenAI, despite its amendment, signals a different path: closer collaboration with the government, a willingness to operate within the legal and policy frameworks defined by the state. It's a more pragmatic, perhaps less principled, but certainly a more compliant approach from the government's perspective. This schism is now the central debate shaping the future of AI and national security. It's the difference between self-regulation and state regulation, effectively.
You mentioned earlier that the supply chain risk designation is a commercial weapon. Can we dig a bit deeper into what that actually means for Anthropic? It sounds devastating.
It is devastating. Imagine being a software company whose core business is providing cutting-edge AI. Now, imagine a huge chunk of your potential market, any company that does business with the US military, is suddenly forbidden from working with you, not because your product is bad or insecure, but because you dared to have ethical boundaries.
So if Northrop Grumman wants to use Anthropic's AI in their next-gen systems, they can't. If a smaller startup working on defense contracts needs a powerful LLM, they can't use Claude.
Correct. It means that Anthropic is cut off from an entire segment of the economy, a segment that often drives significant innovation and revenue for tech companies. It's not just the direct DoD contracts, it's the ripple effect through the entire defense industrial base. It makes it incredibly difficult for them to grow, to partner, to even just exist as a viable commercial entity in certain spaces.
And you said this kind of weapon was previously reserved for foreign adversaries. Now it's hitting an American company. What message does that send to the broader US tech industry?
It sends a profound, chilling message. It tells companies that prioritizing AI safety and ethics over government demands can lead to severe, potentially existential punishment. Why would any other company invest heavily in robust safety research or take a public, principled stance on the use of their technology if they know it could lead to this kind of blacklisting?
So it could actively disincentivize ethical development. That's a perverse outcome.
It absolutely is. It could stifle innovation in responsible AI, pushing companies towards a don't ask, don't tell policy, or simply making them more amenable to whatever the government wants rather than what they believe is ethically sound. The irony here is thick. Before this conflict, Claude was lauded as a model of secure and reliable AI. It was the only model approved for the military's most sensitive systems.
So they were the good guys, the secure choice, and now they're blacklisted because of ethics, not security.
Exactly. It's a paradigm shift. The government is signaling that policy alignment, not just technical prowess or security, is now a critical, non-negotiable component of what it considers a secure supply chain. This redefinition has lasting and unpredictable consequences for the relationship between the government and the tech sector. It's not about vulnerabilities, it's about values.
You mentioned earlier that the supply chain risk designation is a commercial weapon. Can we dig a bit deeper into what that actually means for Anthropic? It sounds devastating.
It is devastating. Imagine being a software company whose core business is providing cutting-edge AI. Now, imagine a huge chunk of your potential market, any company that does business with the US military, is suddenly forbidden from working with you, not because your product is bad or insecure, but because you dared to have ethical boundaries.
So if Northrop Grumman wants to use Anthropic's AI in their next-gen systems, they can't. If a smaller startup working on defense contracts needs a powerful LLM, they can't use Claude.
Correct. It means that Anthropic is cut off from an entire segment of the economy, a segment that often drives significant innovation and revenue for tech companies. It's not just the direct DoD contracts, it's the ripple effect through the entire defense industrial base. It makes it incredibly difficult for them to grow, to partner, to even just exist as a viable commercial entity in certain spaces.
And you said this kind of weapon was previously reserved for foreign adversaries. Now it's hitting an American company. What message does that send to the broader U.S. tech industry?
It sends a profound, chilling message. It tells companies that prioritizing AI safety and ethics over government demands can lead to severe, potentially existential punishment. Why would any other company invest heavily in robust safety research or take a public, principled stance on the use of their technology if they know it could lead to this kind of blacklisting?
So it could actively disincentivize ethical development. That's a perverse outcome.
It absolutely is. It could stifle innovation in responsible AI, pushing companies towards a don't ask, don't tell policy, or simply making them more amenable to whatever the government wants rather than what they believe is ethically sound. The irony here is thick. Before this conflict, Claude was lauded as a model of secure and reliable AI. It was the only model approved for the military's most sensitive systems.
So they were the good guys, the secure choice, and now they're blacklisted because of ethics, not security.
Exactly. It's a paradigm shift. The government is signaling that policy alignment, not just technical prowess or security, is now a critical, non-negotiable component of what it considers a secure supply chain. This redefinition has lasting and unpredictable consequences for the relationship between the government and the tech sector. It's not about vulnerabilities, it's about values.
They did. The internal backlash was so strong that Google ultimately decided not to renew the contract. That was a big win for the Tech for Good crowd, and a moment where employee activism genuinely shaped corporate policy regarding military engagement.
But you're saying the environment has changed since 2018?
Dramatically. The rapid advancements in AI, coupled with the heavy state investment in military AI by China, have really shifted the debate within Silicon Valley. There's a growing number of tech leaders and venture capitalists who now argue that contributing to U.S. national security is a patriotic duty and a strategic necessity.
So it's less don't be evil and more beat China?
For some, yes. It's about maintaining a technological edge over geopolitical rivals. This shift has led to a new wave of collaboration and even the rise of defense-focused tech startups. It's no longer a uniform stance.
Which brings us back to the core question this Anthropic conflict highlights. Who has the ultimate authority to define the ethical boundaries for the use of military AI?
This is the crux of it. On one side, you have Anthropic's case for corporate responsibility. They argue that as the creators of this immensely powerful technology, they have an unavoidable responsibility to act as ethical stewards and prevent its misuse. For them, certain applications, like fully autonomous weapons, are too dangerous with current tech, regardless of legality.
And the Pentagon's argument?
Their case is for governmental authority. In a democracy, the military operates under the control of a civilian government elected by the people. Therefore, the government, bound by domestic and international law, must be the ultimate arbiter of how technology is used to defend the nation. From their perspective, a private company's refusal to provide its technology for lawful purposes is an unacceptable infringement on sovereign authority.
So it's creators versus the state, the people who build the tools versus the people who are elected to wield them. This isn't just about AI anymore. It's about who gets to draw the lines in our society.
Exactly. And the resolution of this dispute, whether it's through the courts, new legislation, or a shift in public opinion, will set a critical precedent for how the United States develops and deploys AI in the high-stakes arena of national security.
This whole situation is just brimming with implications. So if we're looking forward, what are the key takeaways or questions that listeners should be thinking about after this?
I think the first big insight is this fundamental clash of philosophies. The principled AI approach championed by Anthropic, where companies impose hard-coded ethical limits, versus the compliant AI approach, favored by OpenAI and the Pentagon, where tech aligns with existing governmental policies and laws. Which model ultimately prevails will shape the future of AI development.
And the commercial viability of taking a stand, right? Is it commercially sustainable for an AI company to be a conscientious objector in the age of great power competition?
Anthropic's fate will be a powerful answer to that question.
Absolutely. Second, the legal precedents being set are massive. If Anthropic wins its lawsuits, it could fundamentally change the power dynamic between tech and government, giving companies more leverage for ethical stances. If they lose, it could grant the executive branch immense power over the tech industry's ethical choices.
And what about the legislative branch? Does Congress step in here?
That's the third key point. This crisis might force Congress's hand. Will they pass legislation that provides clear rules for the military's use of AI, perhaps resolving the ambiguity around lawful use and setting ethical floors for all government contractors? That could be a way to bridge this divide.
And finally, a big picture question that I can't shake. Does this internal conflict, these ethical debates, ultimately hinder the US in the global AI race? Or does a commitment to safety and ethics prove to be a long-term strategic advantage?
That's the million-dollar question. China faces no such internal ethical debates regarding military AI. So, does our struggle for ethical AI make us slower? Or does it make our AI more trustworthy and robust in the long run? It's a gamble either way.